from CryptoSeoul and welcome to the Eри카쇼. The E리카쇼 introduces builders and leaders in the blockchain space. 새해 복 많이 받으세요. 크립토서울 에리카입니다. 에리카쇼 2021년 첫 게스트는 크립토키티로 잘 알려진 Dapper Labs의 공동창립자이자 CTO이신 Dieter Shirley님을 초대했습니다. Our first guest of 2021, the new year, is Dieter Shirley, co-founder and CTO of Dapper Labs. Dieter, welcome to the show. Hi.
So glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Erica.
You're the first guest of 2021. I'm so excited for the new year. And, you know, I've been wanting to have you on the show for a long time, so finally excited to make it happen. How have you been?
Well, I can tell by your shirt that you're a fan of what we've been doing at Dapper Labs. It's one of my favorite t-shirts of all time, and I'm glad you got one.
I'm wearing it all the time in Ho Chi Minh City, and I'm located here, so very excited to share the love and to so great to have you. And before we get started, you know, Liz, can you give us like a brief introduction of who you are to the Asian CryptoSeoul community?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Dieter Shirley. I'm the CTO of Dapper Labs. I was also the original author of ERC-721 and one of the co-creators of CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties, of course, was what launched Dapper Labs. CryptoKitties was actually a project of a company called Axiom Zen, which was sort of a startup foundry. So it had the model of creating lots of different products and setting them to market and sort of seeing what might get some traction. And of course, one of the things that got traction was, in fact, CryptoKitties. It was our first crypto project, and it was something that I was personally really invested in and excited about because I had been following and indeed running a CPU miner for Bitcoin since back in 2010, and so I thought this technology was really, really fascinating, and the ability to try and create you know, sort of a sustainable product on top of it that was also a lot of fun and would introduce it to a consumer audience was super exciting for me. And of course, you know, it sort of broke the network and got a lot of attention. And so, you know, we decided to double down on that mission of taking this amazing technology, which, I mean, I'm sure anyone who's going to watch this understands how transformational it can be. But they also, anybody who's watching this knows how difficult it is to convince the majority of people that what we've got here is real and not just crazy speculation. And I mean, CryptoKitties was a step towards trying to show people, not tell people, let them feel for themselves what the difference between what this decentralized technology could do and what, you know, there's it could feel, parts of it could feel as comfortable as the centralized technology they're used to, but this idea of true ownership was something that was brand new, and the ability to sort of have these digital things in a real sense, not leasing them, not being, you know, sort of renters of digital property, but owners of digital property was something that we felt was going to really resonate with people. So we started Dapper Labs, and the goal of Dapper Labs was, you know, really straightforward. Let's bring blockchain technology to a consumer audience. The problem with that is that it's a really big problem, and we sort of identified right out the gate that there was three major problems that we're going to have to solve. One was just that we needed to find a blockchain that would support the kind of dApps that we wanted, because we had literally just broken Ethereum. The second was that we needed to have a better onboarding experience. MetaMask was great. It got so many people into CryptoKitties, but it turned off even more. The number of people who came to our website and fell off when they came to installing a Chrome plugin, or even switching browsers, because not everyone uses Chrome, was a huge problem. And so that's when we started building Dapper Wallet. And then we knew that we needed that, you know, what CryptoKitties told us more than anything else was that if you create great content in this space, then you can attract people. And so we wanted to create new content as well. And of course, each of those three things became respectively, you know, the Flow blockchain, the new iteration of Dapper Wallet, that is running the third thing, that's powering the third thing, which is NBA Topshot, I think one of the most exciting products I've ever worked on.
Wow, what an introduction, right? I think I think Dapper Labs and CryptoKitties was definitely a pioneering product and service that people were so excited about, because like besides, I mean, of course there were like uncomfortable experience in the beginning, like as you said, the MetaMask experience and all, but like the meaning of just having it there, like in the first like beginning, there were back in the day, I remember there were so many like layer ones with no prototype, and like, it was just all theory, and it was great, but then you couldn't really experience it. And I think like that's why CryptoKitties got so much attention because of that, and getting people excited about that we can actually like own something and have an experience like that. So I really, it's been symbolic. So and I'm Dieter, a big fan of it. And I mean, you kind of mentioned in the beginning that you got into space in 2010, was it? Like it was like back in the day, but like everyone has their own unique, crazy crypto story, but like how did you, like, what's your background, and like how did you come into like all the CPU mining and getting into like having your crypto game in CryptoKitties?
Well, it's funny because there were sort of, cryptocurrencies bring together three things that were always passions of mine, and which up until the launch of Bitcoin didn't seem to be at all related, right? I was a software engineer writing code all the time. My minor in university had been in coding theory and cryptography. I found that stuff really interesting. But, prior to that, it was, you get like a crypto library, but like this idea that you had to understand the inner parts of it. Unless you were explicitly working on those crypto libraries, it was actually a pretty fringe thing. And then economics. I've always found economics really fascinating. I'd done a ton of reading on it. I didn't have much in the way of formal training on it, but it was just one of those things that I read as a hobby. And so when this thing came along, one of my friends who knew me was like, "Oh, this seems like it might be your kind of thing." And I remember reading that original white paper and really being impressed. And then starting to run the software and seeing, how it all worked. And what's funny is that the part of it that I think inspired the most people in the early days was the part of it that I found least interesting, which is this idea of subverting government control over money, or creating a free form of money. That to me was the least interesting part of it. It's not that I don't understand why that's interesting. It's just it doesn't spark interest in me. But the incentives and the game theory of paying the miners to do this work, the brilliance of the simplistic brilliance of proof of work itself as a way of solving this consensus problem, which is devilishly hard to solve. I just found all of that really, really fascinating. And so, so it just sort of, I naturally gravitated to the technology side of it, I think, more than the sort of, the revolutionary side of it. And so, I really, I think once I sort of absorbed the basis of it, I sort of put it on the shelf for a while. I didn't think about it for several years, until suddenly those coins that I had mined back in 2010 started to have some real value. And so I sort of brought myself back into it. And of course, by then there had just been so much more writing and thought about both the social implications of the technology, but also just like, stuff like the verifier's dilemma. People were starting to notice that kind of stuff. And there was just way more thought about it. And of course, when Ethereum burst on the scene and it went from being a financial system to a financial system that had code attached to it, that's when suddenly I was like, okay, now I really need to get serious about this, because like I said early on, the exciting thing to me was the technology part of it. And now when, we had like the ability to write sort of arbitrary code and to create brand new things, completely new constructs on top of it. That's really when my imagination got sparked again.
And then like were you at Axiom Zen back then, like at that time? Like, and then you kind of like added the crypto aspect to make like CryptoKitties as like a trial game, or what was the story like? Because Axiom Zen is not a crypto only company, right?
No, Axiom was formed in 2013, and it was what we called a startup foundry, and it created a bunch of different technologies. None of them were games, actually. So we had Axiom has two other successful spin-outs. One is called ZenHub, which is a project management tool that plugs into GitHub, and is used by a lot of companies. Including folks like Apple and NASA and IBM. And then the other one was Routific, which is a routing service. So if you're a small or medium-sized business and you are doing deliveries, how do you, if you have 20 deliveries to do and one truck to do it, how do you route that truck optimally? That's of course a famous computer science problem, and they have some great heuristics for optimizing those routes. And so it was really just like riding new technology waves and finding new tools. And so in 2017, when there was a lot of fervor around crypto, especially around ICOs and stuff, that was what getting a lot of people attention. I think that was when I really felt like I could go to the company and say, look, like, there's a genuine business argument here, right? Like back in 2013, when I first joined Axiom Zen, there were lots of people at the company, including myself, who were keen on Bitcoin and whatnot. And I remember in 2013 trying to convince the CEO that we should buy a mining rig. And he, I think, correctly pointed out that was not our business model. But in 2017, it was like, no, like we can build a product on this thing. And it doesn't have to be a toy. It doesn't just have to be an experiment. There's a chance that this can actually take off and do something real. And so we investigated all sorts of stuff because of course, everyone was talking about how this could revolutionize real estate and the insurance markets and whatnot. And so we did a ton of deep research into all sorts of topics, including those two. But one day, one of my coworkers came to me, Mac, and he says, Dieter, we're going to put cats on the blockchain. And I said, Mac, what does that even mean? He's like, I don't know yet, but the internet loves cats, and so we need to put cats on the blockchain. And of course, like that wasn't really an idea, but it was also like a brilliant idea. And so we started workshopping it. We started talking internally about what these cats would be and what they would look like and whatnot. And I was the one who really strongly pushed for the fact that it couldn't, like, one of the early ideas was just like, let's have cat memes. Let's have ownable cat memes. And that was, I think it was a really good idea. I know that there's some projects that are doing something along those lines too, but I really wanted the cats to do something. Like I wanted there to be another action you could take with your cat other than just owning it or selling it.
Right.
And the meme idea sort of had some limits there. And we had talked about maybe, you could do combination of memes, but then I proposed the idea that we should make it a breeding game and that there could be this whole exploratory element of, we would release these sort of, base level cats, what ended up being called Gen Zeros, and that would seed the genetic material for, millions of kitties. Millions of kitties seemed like an impossible dream, but we wanted to make sure that was possible, and of course it did come to pass. And and it was a lot of work, I think, to get a breeding algorithm that was interesting and fun without it being so complicated, because some of the early ideas we had, it just wouldn't have been feasible on Ethereum. Even the breeding algorithm we came up with, which had to be optimized and simplified, ended up being quite gas intensive. But I think we found a really sweet spot, and the fact that tens of thousands of people have played the breeding game. We still have hundreds of people every single week playing this game, is a real testament to the fact that I think we did a great job.
Yeah, in the beginning, when CryptoKitties came out, the first impression was like, oh, is it because like Vitalik loves cats? That was my first impression. But I guess like there was another reason for choosing cats being on the blockchain. And like when I saw the Twitter introduction of Dapper Labs, it currently says that Dapper Labs is putting more than cats on the blockchain, which was super like interesting to me. And can you elaborate more like what you've built recently? Like I know you talked about NBA Topshot, but that's like for me as a basketball fan, like it's super interesting. But like other than cats on the blockchain, what other things that are you putting on the on the blockchain currently?
Well, I think there's the obvious answer to that is that that we've got NBA Topshot. It's running right now. We've got lots of people using it. We just had an explosion over the last week of interest in that. And the number of people participating and the number of moments being traded back and forth between players has skyrocketed in the last week. And we were already on a really steady growth path. But it seems like something about the new season and the new year got a bunch of new people excited. So it's really blowing up right now. So we're really excited about that. But I think the more meta point is that we're of course there's going to be a new version of CryptoKitties at some point. We want to get that right. So that's undergoing a pretty intensive design process. But the key part of that is that we're enabling other people to do stuff on blockchains. So Flow was, like I said, it's designed. We felt we needed to build our own blockchain that is fundamentally different from what the way that other blockchains are being built. Like Flow is not a fork of anything. Flow is such a novel architecture that when we hire people, even people who, we've got people who worked on the team who've worked on the Ethereum 2 clients, and it takes them weeks to really understand what we're doing because it's so different than the way other blockchains are structured. But inevitably they come away going, wow, like this, now that I understand it, it makes so much sense to do it this way. And so, the reason we did that was because we had the experience of what it's like to try and build an app on a blockchain. And like, I don't think any other layer one team actually started by building a smart contract or trying to build a product that had a business model that could actually, sustain a company. And so, every decision we made in terms of how we designed Flow, once we decided that we did need a new blockchain, was about like, how can we make sure that developers and users have a great experience on this thing? And so when we say we're putting more than just cats on the blockchain, what we mean is that we're trying to enable, this new class of applications in a way that goes beyond just, slightly better tools, but like involves a complete rethink of how both developers and users sort of interact with blockchains.
I was like, when Flow was announced, I was super surprised because like, I thought, they're going to build more like same version of CryptoKitties, like version 2, version 3, but like you're building like this entire blockchain from scratch. And, I was just going to say, it's not even a fork of anything. And, so your team decided to do it because, of those limitations. And as you mentioned, what are some differentiating traits of Flow that you can introduce to us?
Yeah, I mean, so in 2018, we had just broken Ethereum. We're like, okay, well, we need a different blockchain, clearly. And, and that included Ethereum 2, right? Like Ethereum 2 is such a massive re-architecture of Ethereum that you might as well think of it as a new blockchain. And so we put Ethereum 2 up against all of the other people that were proposing L1s. And what we realized is that every single L1 that was proposed that could reach the kind of scale that we needed, right? Thousands or tens of thousands of transactions per second. They fell into one of two camps. And option number one was that they were like Ethereum 2, they had a sharded architecture. And this is like a subtle thing that, I would argue that even many people who are building L1s don't understand or haven't fully internalized the power as an application developer of being able to, with a single atomic, transaction, access all of the state on the entire blockchain is incredibly powerful. And the best example of this is DeFi, where every single DeFi project that comes out these days, none of them are standalone. None of them are an independent thing. Every single new one that comes out is like, oh, well, now I've added this on top of these 3 other projects, right? And this, you know, you look at like IFI is sort of or Wi-Fi is sort of the biggest one, where it's just like, it's meta on top of all of these other things. And that's not possible unless you're in the same atomic state space with those other things. So much of what DeFi is doing right now only makes sense if all of those smart contracts live on the same shard and can talk to each other atomically. Now, someone could come in and say, well, technically you can build locking mechanisms and do asynchronous communication between shards. And that's true, but that's hard. and if anyone who doesn't think writing secure smart contracts is hard enough already and wants to make it even harder and harder to get, you know, and more difficult to get right, really hasn't tried hard enough or looked at how many people, like, you know, the people who sort of built the early versions of the software still have had giant hacks where their smart contracts have had errors in them. And so we didn't want to put that complexity on developers, because again, we were developers, we were starting as developers. So sharding, we're like, this can't do sharding. But when we looked at all the other projects who were promising to not do sharding, they had really strict limitations on who could participate. In some cases, you had projects like EOS, where it was literally just like, if you're not one of the 21 validators or whatever the number is, then you're just not participating. Right. And I looked at that and I was like, I don't know how this doesn't get captured by somebody somewhere somehow. Like it just seems inconceivable to me with 21 different validators, and that it's not going to eventually, because I think about this technology and even CryptoKitties as being something that should last for decades and maybe even centuries, which is like the first time that software has really been able to imagine existing on those kinds of scales. But Bitcoin is almost unchanged, right, over more than a decade now. Right. And that's exactly, and it's not that like nothing has changed about it, but it's really fundamentally the same thing, and that's its value. Yeah. So that was out. And so at first we're like, well, maybe that's just the way it works. Like maybe that's just the fundamental trade-off of this technology. You either have to have sharding or you have to have this like limited participation. And so what I did was I said, well, look, like that might be true, but let's spend a couple of weeks as a team, and it was just 3 or 4 of us, I think 4 of us. Let's just spend a couple of weeks as a team brainstorming for a few hours every day to see if that is true. And sure enough, locking some smart people in a room together, and talking about, well, what are ways that other systems achieved scale and like broke through what seemed like insurmountable barriers in terms of throughput. And the one that inspired us was computer chips. Computer chips are, modern computer chips, and for decades now, are pipelined. They don't have a computer chip that takes a processor, takes an instruction from memory, executes it, puts the result in memory, and then goes and gets the next instruction. That's simply not what happens. They have this like massively complex pipeline where they're decoding like 8 instructions at a time and then executing them out of order, and then, having these giant buffers that are reordering at the end, because then they can have exactly like, Henry Ford discovered with the assembly line, you can have these specialized pieces working in parallel on different parts of different problems, and you end up with this massive throughput increase. And so we asked ourselves, well, okay, well, let's pipeline a blockchain. What happens if you take all of the steps that, for example, an Ethereum node does today, and you break it into pieces? And we actually identified 11 different steps. And then we asked ourselves, okay, well, which of these should be together? Which of these should be like bundled together, and sort of need to fundamentally happen together? And what we realized is that you could bundle them together into sort of 3 or 4 different groups, but that only most of them they fell into two buckets. Each step fell into one of two buckets, and they were disjoint. And the one bucket was things that required consensus, things that you had to run through a consensus algorithm, whether it's proof of work, proof of stake, whatever. But it had to require consensus because there was no objective answer. And the easiest example is just, well, which transactions are in the blockchain and in what order? Mm-hmm. There's like, if I give you 10 transactions and I have 10 transactions, they're all valid. I can put them in some order, you can put them in another order, and they're both correct objectively. But if we don't agree on them, then if there's any conflict in there, like two people trying to buy the same kitty, our results will be different. So we have to have a consensus on, well, what order are these things in? Mm-hmm. However, once you decide on that order, there is a correct result. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is that the parts that require consensus don't need a lot of data and don't need a lot of processing, whereas the parts that are objective, deterministic, those are the parts that require like heavy networking load, heavy computational load, basically running all of those transactions. And so if we could separate those things, then what we could do is we could say, look, anybody who wants to, it has consumer hardware with with home broadband, high-speed home broadband that they're willing to dedicate to this, they should be able to run one of these consensus or checking nodes that is like making sure that what's happening is correct. Mm-hmm. But we can have a small number of computers doing this really hard work. And those computers, even though you can make an argument that like, oh, well, we only have 10 of those or only have 12 of those, right? How is that better than the 21 that we talked about on EOS? Except that those computers, that small number of what we call execution nodes, they have absolutely zero determining power over what happens in the blockchain. They are told exactly which transactions they're going to run. They're told exactly what order those transactions are going to be run in. Mm-hmm. And they have a choice. They can either produce a correct result and get paid, or they can fail to produce a result and not get paid, or they can produce an incorrect result and get slashed. And that is it. They can't do anything else. Mm-hmm. And so all you need is a single honest execution node to keep the system alive. And we don't even need to depend on a single honest execution node to keep the system safe, because we have these verifiers that are probabilistically checking the result of the execution nodes. And so even if every single execution node were to collude and try and produce an incorrect result at the same time, it would be caught with overwhelming probability by these thousands of verifier nodes that are all probabilistically checking the output that they've produced, and they would all be slashed. And, potentially millions of dollars of value would be lost by these people trying to fool the system. So why would they ever try and fool it?
Oh, wow. I feel like I'm listening to a lecture now. Oh, wow. That's very interesting. Would there be just asking, but would there be any maybe disadvantage or limitations regarding this concept? Any worries, concerns on your end or by running this type of concept?
It's much more complex. It's much, much more complex. So if you look at almost any other blockchain, every single participant, every single node in that blockchain is running more or less fundamentally the same software. With Flow, we have 4 different nodes that are all having a different task. And so it's a lot more complex. And that makes that makes our safety proofs harder. So, we don't have one white paper explaining describing our safety proofs. We have 3 separate, each of which is very long and complex. And it just means there's a lot more code and a lot more complexity there. And so that's really, I don't think you can, that's important, right? Like making something complex is making it harder, for it to be correct. And so that's one of the reasons why we've been very cautious about rolling out Flow. So people can use Flow right now today. There's Flow token. You can stake and delegate your tokens and earn rewards for helping to secure the network. But at the same time, we're being very cautious about who we allow to deploy smart contracts on top of the network. We're asking people to go through a security review. We're even providing, sort of architectural support to them to make sure that, that their systems are robust. We're being very cautious about who's running nodes, making sure that we sort of know who they are, and that at least for the short term, that those people are folks that we can trust to not intentionally try and take down the network. Because like I said, I think it is very complex. And so, we've engaged QuantStamp to go through an audit of the whole thing. And we expect that that's just going to be a months-long process because, there's so many parts of it that, any single one part of flow is nearly as complex as a whole blockchain, sort of a more traditionally structured blockchain. And we have all of these different parts. And so it's going to take a long time to get through it all. But we're really committed to making sure that we have something that's very robust. It's all open source. We were already starting to take pull requests from the community. So if any of your listeners are keen to help us get this very complex, but we think incredibly powerful new system online, we'd love to help you get started.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like the Korean community, there's been, of course, like initial interest from Cryptokitties, but then like how flow is flowing out, I think a lot of the Korean community is very excited, especially the technical community. Like they're super impressed with the tech, and yeah, I think our listeners would love to take part and make this a bigger community. And the Flow Summit also helped to, spread the word and give more information to the community. So very exciting. And of course, in 2020, 2020 was not all bad for Flow. I think like for most of us, it was very gloomy and depressing. But for Flow, I think there's been so many partnerships being announced. I was like in shock. Like, how can, this team be like slamming out all these amazing partnerships? And can you share with us a few that that you find more, I don't know, more meaningful or not? Yeah, meaningful and impressive to you, maybe personally.
Yeah, I mean the big names are impressive. So we've signed Dr. Seuss, we've signed UFC. Obviously, we've got the NBA game coming out, and there's several other IPs that are talking to us, but that I can't announce publicly yet. But IP holders really like to work with us because they feel it's really valuable to them, right? Like if you're a company like Dr. Seuss, all you really have is your the feelings that people associate with those characters and that property. And so you want to be really thoughtful doing it. And so if you are interested in crypto, right, and not every team that we talk to, we talk to all sorts of IP teams, and they're almost all willing to take our phone call, but some of them just don't want to get into crypto.
Right.
But if they are interested in getting into crypto, like we have a really good track record of, producing high quality experiences, but also just like creating experiences that is respectful to the community. And not just being like, a cash grab and like selling a bunch of stuff and then, saturating the market to get as much revenue as possible. But we want to be really thoughtful about creating a really sustainable long-term thing. And, for Topshot, we spent a really, really long time. And in fact, at the beginning of this year, we almost completely tore up our plans for how we were going to release Moments and started from scratch because it just didn't feel right to the collector. Right? It was probably going to make us a bunch of money in the short term, but for the long term, we felt like it wasn't going to be sustainable. And so we changed the way it worked. And I'm really happy with the system we have now. I think lots of our users are, and there's a lot of, we have a lot of scope for tweaking it, but I think we've set a really strong foundation. So that's really exciting. But I'm also just like, I love working with some of these new teams, probably people that maybe you haven't heard of yet. There's a team that, sort of went on to Kickstarter called Chain Monsters, very small team, mostly just one person. But he's starting to hire up a team now because his Kickstarter sort of 10x'd, I think, what his original projections were. And so working with folks like that is really exciting. But also just being able to work with, one that made me so excited and so pleased when I found out that they were willing to publicly commit. I knew that they had been following Flow for a long time, OpenSea. They'd been following Flow pretty much from the get-go, but they've been really cautious about supporting new L1s because I think that they rightly understand that, they don't want to disrupt their existing community. But that was a team that came immediately in the wake of CryptoKitties, and OpenSea came out right after CryptoKitties, and we reached out to them within a few weeks of them launching, and they were super smart, really nice guys, and we were really we didn't have much to do to work with them at that time, right? Because they were they had everything they needed on chain, but it was still, it was neat to be able to bring this team that we'd known for years at this point in time, that had done so well and taken this, this core idea that we had sort of kicked off and just ran that down the field in ways that we couldn't even imagine, and say like, hey, we've got a new place for you that's going to be perfect for you and your customers. And so when they got on board, that one was really exciting as well. So, I don't know. There's just so many. It's a pretty big community, but those are the ones that really I think stand out to me personally.
Yeah, there's so many. I even cannot keep track of them. And randomly, like my Korean friend, he was writing up a post about how he was checking his NBA Topshot beta, and he was like, "Wow, the price went up so much!" Like in a few the last week, like as you mentioned before. And he was like, "What's happening here? Like, there's so much traffic now." And he was very impressed with the outcome, the current state. So that's super interesting. Like, I saw the website. I mean, I saw the service, and it was amazing. Like the completeness. I think it was really and the design was perfect. So I mean, it was like not like a. I mean, I don't want to like degrade any other crypto like other games, but like it was very like more complete than I have ever seen. So yeah, I was very impressed. But like, I mean, how did you like tackle how did you even approach the NBA guys? Like, I cannot really see like how you can like get them on board. Like, it's very interesting. Like the business side of I think Dapper Labs is it's amazing, but like. Did you just randomly did you approach them? Like did the team approach NBA team, or what happened? Like,
yeah, so we have a dedicated business development team who goes out and talks to companies, and when you've been written up in the New York Times, it's a little easier to get a phone call, the first phone call. And like I said, a lot of people take our phone calls and then very politely say, like, this crypto thing isn't for us. Every month that goes by, that becomes less and less frequent, and up to and including people calling us back. So there was a team that I can't name because we haven't signed anything with them yet, but we talked to them quite a bit. They were really excited about what we were doing, and then when we were getting ready to start putting together what sort of an agreement might look like, it came back that we're like, oh, well, we've run it by sort of the execs of the company. This is a big enough company that the execs weren't even aware of the discussions up until that point. And it's just like, we're not going to do crypto. We can't do anything that is crypto. And that team's come back to us now, and we're starting to talk about what a piece of work might look like. So as time goes on, those things are starting to turn around. But the NBA was really keen on it. They loved the idea. They have a very young audience. They have a very forward-thinking audience, and they love the people at the NBA are really, I think, more than. I don't know. I haven't talked to a ton of people. I'm getting some of this secondhand, but I really get a sense that the people who run the NBA really have such a love of the game in a way that maybe some of the other leagues don't, and they're they're more in touch with their fan base, and I think they really understand how valuable, and maybe it's shoe culture, like sneaker culture, but this like idea that people want to own a piece of their passion for themselves. And they really, really understood that. And so we actually, they were entertaining multiple companies to do some sort of crypto project and some sort of crypto collectible project. And so they were very excited to talk to us. They, I think it's possible the financial terms of the other bids were better than ours, but they just knew that we were going to do a great job, and that ultimately what was more important to them, again, right, this real empathy for their fans, was to make sure that what we did, they wanted to make sure that what we were doing was creating value for their fans. And that was way more important to them than like the bottom line. And of course, you know, they get a piece of everything we're doing, and they should, because, you know, they're sort of, you know, they're the arbiters of the content that the people love. But I think that they really, really were way more, it was way more important to them that we do a good job, that we have a product that they're proud of, than what especially the short-term upside was going to look like.
Yeah, I mean, other than the name, I'm sure it's like super meaningful in many ways, but can you like kind of walk us through like why it's so exciting, and for NBA fans, how can they access it? How can they utilize it? And just like walk us through like how it can be very meaningful to them.
So anyone who wants to check it out can. It's a, you know, it was in early access for a while, but right now anyone who wants to come can sign up. Just search for NBA Topshot, and because it's all backed by the Dapper wallet technology, you can come in with nothing more than email address and a credit card and get started. On the other hand, if you have Ether or Bitcoin and you want to buy stuff with that, you're more than welcome to as well. And all of the assets you buy are secured by this new Flow blockchain. The fundamental premise of it is that, you know, people, there have been collectibles of all sorts of types. There's sneaker collectibles where you can own the same pair of sneakers as some of your biggest fans. There's obviously people who collected jerseys for a long time and have, you know, a jersey that's either, you know, with the same number as their favorite. And of course, you know, cards, right? Started with baseball cards, but you know, there are basketball cards and whatnot that commemorate individual players. But for the first time, we live in a world where the actual moments in a game of basketball can be captured and turned into a collectible. And so we call them moments, NBA Topshot moments, and they are literally a, you know, 5 to 15 second clip of an amazing play that happened in a real game, captured in these beautiful, like high-tech looking cubes that commemorate the team and the player and the day of that game. And they come in different varieties, of course, you know, so there's some that are, you know, more visually, have visually better decorations and whatnot, and that are rarer. Each one has its own serial number. And of course, people love collecting the ones that have where the serial number matches the player's jersey number. But fundamentally what you get to do is you get to go and find the teams you love, the players you love, and the individual moments from a game of basketball that you love. And you get to collect those, you get to own those things. And it is true blockchain mediated ownership. And we have a peer-to-peer marketplace where people are selling to each other at a price that they set. We take a small commission from that. But fundamentally, it's, you know, we sell them out in packs, and we're constantly getting new moments because basketball keeps getting played, and these players keep doing amazing things. And so, you know, you can go and watch a game, and then if you see one of your players do something amazing, there's a very good chance that you can go and you can find that moment on our marketplace. And so that's, you know, that's fundamentally it, is you get to own a piece of history. And that's secured on the Flow blockchain and will be indefinitely. And that'll be your thing with true ownership. And so, you know, it doesn't doesn't all exist today, but these things will be tradable on secondary markets that that we don't control. We're hoping to see people use these things potentially as game pieces in games. We're working on a mobile game that we think will let people use these moments as part of the gameplay there to power up their experience. And it's I think it's just like it's just a beautiful, highly polished, to your point, experience, and just the amount of time and effort that the art team put into making these collectibles beautiful, exciting, interesting, and just really capture the spirit of basketball, I think is really impressive. And I know that loads of players, we've got players who've invested in us, we've got players who've done promotions with us. They love it, they think it's amazing, and the fans that come in enjoy it. And it's really interesting to see how we have people who come in who are pure crypto collectibles people who didn't care that much about basketball, but they know what a quality project looks like. They trust that we're going to have some longevity and that we're going to put a lot of effort into this over the long term. And at the same time, we have people who are coming in who are basketball fans who've never owned cryptocurrency in their life, who bought everything they bought on Topshot with their credit card, and who just keep coming back all the time because they just love it. And for me, that's the power of NBA Topshot. Yeah. That is different than CryptoKitties. With CryptoKitties, you had to come in and you had to understand crypto, and then you could play CryptoKitties. And CryptoKitties was cool enough that a bunch of people pushed themselves over that hump. But now with Topshot, you can come in and you can start to play this collectibles game, and then you can learn about crypto, and then you can learn about all these cryptocurrencies and stuff. And you get to have that experience and then learn, rather than having to learn and then to get the experience. And I think that's going to make a huge difference.
That's the ideal way to mass adoption, right? that is the true way to make people excited, interested, and naturally get used to crypto. And that's very powerful indeed. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't know why, but it reminds me of like Harry Potter, like good magic. Like you take out your magic ball and like poof, and like this NBA replay. I don't know. It's very exciting concept and futuristic as well. And I read this article, right, that Warner Music invested in Flow in 2019. In your opinion, I mean, entertainment is, of course, like a huge industry, and as a big fan of BTS, I would love to, see a collaboration, like with, I don't know, potentially BTS or any other, pop stars out there. But in your opinion, like, what role can NFT play in entertainment as well, and music industry?
Well, I mean, obviously, this notion of collectibles, and I think that it's just a natural human thing, right? To like, we want to have a way of expressing both to ourselves when we look around the space that we have, originally physical space, but now digital space, where we can see the things that we love, and we can reflect our personality in our surroundings. And when you look at something like Fortnite, that their revenue is just in that expression. It is just it. But people buying stuff in Fortnite, again, they're not buying it. They don't own it. They're leasing it. They're renting it. And that all goes away, at the snap of the fingers, if it ever suits the company. And right now, it doesn't suit the company, and it might not for 5 years. But what about 10 years from now? What about 20 years from now, when they have maybe a new property, or the company isn't doing as well and it gets bought by some big conglomerate? You don't know what's going to happen there. And so I think that's like a fundamentally human thing. And especially when we talk about music, like, people just love to express themselves, right? Like, it's one of the most common kind of printed T-shirts is to have a band or an album that you love. And so I think that's definitely going to be an area that people will do. I do think that there is like a whole, like, I'm personally very excited about new kinds of gameplay where, CryptoKitties was obviously a very, very simple kind of game. But the logic of that game was mediated by the blockchain, which meant that we could set up the rules, but even we can't break the rules as the creators of that game. And that's like a really, really interesting idea. And so, what can we do with the next thing? That's really interesting. And then the other thing that's really interesting, and that is when it is something that we saw just the glimmerings of with CryptoKitties, which we're seeing, as I mentioned earlier, with DeFi, and which I think that is going to be giant when it happens, and I think it's inevitable that it will happen, is when somebody builds a game and then that is mediated by the blockchain, and then somebody else builds new functionality on top of that, that is net added, right? So we know, like, some of the most popular games in the world started as mods of existing games. And what if those mods could be built in a way that they become as immutable and permanent as the original game, but at the same time, they can't break the rules of the original game because the original game is encoded in smart contracts that are inviolable. And like, we had really simple stuff with CryptoKitties, right? There was a game called Kitty Racing where you just take your cats and you'd go to a racetrack and you'd race your cats and bet on them, right? But that there's no reason why somebody couldn't build an adventure game that uses CryptoKitties. Yeah. And there's all sorts of interesting ideas that I think can be plumbed in there. And in the same way that we see DeFi getting more and more interesting and complex, is everybody builds a new piece that builds on top of the old piece, but can't subvert the old piece, can only add to it. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. So that's the part I understand the best. I think that, like, this whole notion of fashion and self-identity is another really, really big one. But that one's going to be, we need to find a way to let people show those things off. Right now, if you're a huge basketball fan, you can send your friends, your showcase of your Topshot collection, but it's not the same as a teenager who's got posters up in their room, and when their friends come over, they see them without me having to say, "Oh, look at my collection," right? It's just there ambiently. And I think we're going to get to that point with our digital spaces, but it's going to take a little bit more work before we get there.
Yeah, but we're getting there, I think, slowly but surely. I mean, for Dapper Labs, there's much things going on at the moment, but are there any upcoming milestones that you would like to share, or that you can share to the community?
Well, I mean, Topshot, it just keeps getting better and better. That one is, on a steady iterative improvement, new content, new features, stuff coming out all the time. For anybody who's got a developer bent out there, we just keep, building more tools for people who want to build dApps and smart contracts on top of Flow. We did rethink a lot of how blockchain should work, and we're quite confident that we've made things much better in the long run, but it does require quite a bit of learning. And so there's a lot of documentation and examples that exist, but there's even more that we're coming on. So I think that's coming on. I don't think we have any sort of like specific like launches planned that we're excited about right now. We're kind of we've got Topshot out there, we've got Flow out there. We've got, we've put the token out, and a bunch of people were able to participate in getting that token on CoinList. Those tokens are now being staked and delegated. Hopefully those tokens will start to be traded now that there's, a free, there's some free flowing tokens out there. All the ones we had to sell, all the ones we sold had to have a lockup for legal reasons, but any tokens that people earn are freely transferable. And so now we're just in a point where it's just like we've sketched the outline and we've filled in the major parts, but there's a lot of detail work that still needs to be done. And so we're just going through and we're hiring you know, we're in a everybody is a remote world now, and so I think, you know, we've got multiple we've got several people working on Flow right now out of Europe. We don't have anyone from Asia, and so I think that anyone who has, especially if you've more senior people, we would love to have some more people come in. Like I said, each part of Flow is almost as complex as a whole blockchain, and so we really need to have those people who are, you know, able to understand that level of complexity, and those people are really valuable. And so, but yeah, it's just a lot of building now. We've set the foundation, and there's just a lot of stuff we can build on top of that.
Oh, so much exciting things going on. And for Asian, you know, audience, I think they'll be very interested to check out the employment opportunities as well, participation opportunities. That's great. And as someone like you who have overseen the NFT space, like not only for Dapper Labs, but also just entirety since it literally began, do you think the space and the trend is going in the right direction? I mean, in your like just personal general perspective?
Yes, because it's going in all sorts of directions. And so like, I don't think anyone knows exactly, quote unquote, what the right direction is, but exactly what needs to happen when we don't know what the right direction is happening, where everyone's trying different things. So, I mean, I can look at stuff that I find really interesting, right? I find this whole, this trend towards dynamic artwork, or collaborative artwork, where different people own different parts of a piece of art. That is absolutely fascinating to me. That's not something I would have thought of. And I think that's very, very interesting. I do think that, you know, I think that the value, we should try and capture in the NFT space the stuff that's uniquely true about digital assets. What's cool about blockchains is that it lets us get back some of the features of the physical world that we lost in the move to digital. True ownership, immutability, you know, sort of rules about, you know, like you can't just duplicate things and stuff like that. And I think it is interesting to see people saying, oh, that's great, let's go back to like selling art, you know, and we can sell these static pieces of art. But I think it's way more interesting when you say, but yeah, but yes, we're getting some of that physicality, you know, those features of physical goods back, but we also get the digital stuff, which is, you know, like infinitely evolving, or like the ability for them to breed and create a new one. That's, I think, where that's where I get most excited. But yeah, I mean, look, like it's such, you know, 5 years from now, we're going to look back on today, and it's going to be really clear which of the 2 or 3 projects were the ones that really set the scene for the industry that's to come. I know that they exist today, but like, that's why it's such an exciting time right now, is because I don't think we can know for sure. And I'm just excited that people are taking this like little gem seed of an idea that we planted, you know, years ago now, and are just taking it in all sorts of directions that there's no way that any one person, any single group of people could have done. And that's the power of humanity, right? Is that there's just so many of us that somebody's bound to do something interesting.
Definitely. And the beauty of this industry itself is that it's evolving day by day, and we have no, like as you said, no right direction, but the fact that we have no right direction is the right direction, I guess. Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I'm very excited for the future of Flow and the potential that it has. And I really hope that 2021 is the year that you blossom more and, you know, have more communities in Asia as well. And I'm sure that you're going to attract so many, you know, people in Asia, because you know, it's a natural attraction, right, for a lot of the Asian community, the gamer community as well. Finally, can you share like a final message to the, you know, general CryptoSeoul community or the Asian community in general?
Well, I mean, I think it's important to understand that Flow was always designed, you know, with a global scale in mind. And, you know, the Asian market is one that, you know, we're very excited about. I mean, I think it's certainly true that, just the adoption of new technology is really fast in a lot of countries like Korea. That this like desire to have something new. Obviously, the gaming culture in Korea is like nowhere else, and I think that it just like that this technology is something that I think that the Asian community is just so well poised to build on top of, and like I said, right, like just take it in directions that it wouldn't go otherwise. And so we've done some active outreach into the Asian community, and I think that's gone really well. We've seen lots of people coming to us from that region as well, and we're very happy to see it. It is difficult as a like we are based in Canada, and so we sort of naturally have a specific like a defaults, right? We just have mental defaults that we can't control, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's great for us to have global team members. And like I said, we've got we do have a couple of team members out of Asia already. So Wei, I think, is somebody you might know, for example, and has been talking to lots of people out there. But that's certainly an area where we'd like to grow the team, because I think having people who are really embedded in any community is exactly how you can make sure that you are properly understanding their needs. And so we'd love to have, we get so excited when more people join us, and all the meetups that we've had in Asia so far, virtual and otherwise, have been excellent. And I really look forward to more of those.
Thank you so much for the, your busy time, taking your busy time to talk to me and to the CryptoSeoul community. And I look forward to seeing you in real life, in person, hopefully this year or whenever COVID ends. But thank you so much. And I'm sure that the audience learned a lot from your insight. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed being on the Erica show, and it was a real fun time.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.